Here we go. So today we're talking about restoring native habitats with some examples from California. Annika mentioned it, some of my previous experience, but the one thing I want to say is I'm not a botanist. So we're going to talk about plants today, but I will defer to anybody that wants to correct me on scientific names or a particular plant. I'm much more of an ecologist. So I look at more habitats and communities, and I actually am trained I have more training actually in wildlife and birds, but wildlife and birds doesn't happen without good native habitats. So just my little disclaimer. Okay, so like Annika mentioned, I've been at parks here on the Central Coast for, well, I don't think she said it, but anyways, I've worked here on the Central Coast for 16 years with California state parks. And so today that's what we're going to focus on, is some of our state park lands and two of the projects there. This is our overall mission statement, right? From, I've got to move this out of the way so I can see here. Okay, so this is our mission statement overall for all of our state parks, right? To provide for the health and inspiration and education of the people of California, preserving and protecting our natural and cultural resources, and at the same time, providing opportunities for high quality recreation. Now, I don't know if you all can hear the dichotomy in that about protecting and preserving as well as providing for recreation. It's a big challenge. And I think it represents a lot of where our world is today, you know, trying to coexist with our native habitats and our human population. So I'm actually very inspired by our mission statement, and it's what keeps me motivated in staying at parks. More specifically, you know, so parks has a lot of aspects, right? We have our visitor services like our campgrounds. We have our maintenance staff that deals with facilities. We have our interpreters. We have our cultural staff. I, as an environmental scientist, am a part of our natural resource staff. And we have our own mission. And the mission is here: restore, protect, and maintain representative and outstanding examples of California's natural resources. I think of it kind of as a library. We are a library of some of the natural systems in California for people to see and to protect in perpetuity, or, you know, for generations to come, like a library would, right? So that's our mission. And so the projects that I work on are under the auspice of this mission. Okay, so here we go. We're going to first start with I'm going to talk about two projects, and the first one is at Morro Strand State Beach. So for those of you that are local, hopefully have been here before, this is Morro Bay High School, right? This is just north of Morro Rock, right? Here is an aerial. It's a long, skinny park, right? It's basically bound by the Pacific Ocean and Highway 1 and this development, which is in Morro Bay, Cloisters, and then here's the high school again. So roughly about 193 acres. It does include up here by Old Creek, up by Cayucas, but we're not going to talk about that today. The project that we're talking about today is in this section down here. Morro Strand State Beach. So for a background, you know, it's amazing what our lands have gone through, right? In World War II, this was a major training ground for amphibious landings for, I mean, I don't know the number of troops, but a ton of people out on our dunes practicing what they need to practice for war. It was amazing. And back in that day, you know, Morro Strand was pretty much just flat. It was just sand, right? Not a developed dune system. You know, you hear when we talk to people that have been here for a long time, you know, they remember just driving their vehicles out on Morro Strand. It's really hard sand. And just it kind of being flat from Highway 1 all the way to the beach. So the site has gone through a lot of change. And then the Cloisters development went in, right? So that borders our land. Our campground, the state park campground, went in. So a lot has changed there. We're going to start our story today, my restoration story, around 2007. That's kind of when I came onto the scene. And one thing I like to tell people or talk about is, like, why the Strand? Why do we choose the Strand? Why do we choose particular restoration projects? And there's a lot that goes into answering that question. Because we have, we're San Luis Obispo Coast District. Our state park goes from almost the county line to Montana de Oro. It's a lot of land, and a lot, and we have limited time and money. And so how do we choose? First, there's got to be an ecological nexus, right? There's got to be a reason ecologically why we want to restore it. In the case of Morro Strand, it's an amazing intact dune system, and more that's becoming increasingly rare in California, right? Most of our development is along the coast. So these dune systems there's just not many of them left in California. So it's a unique dune system. And then we had this huge threat of non-natives. So that gave us the ecological reason to restore it. But then there's the logistics, which is it doable? Do you have money? Is it achievable? That doable part of it. And that's huge. And so in the case of Morro Strand, we had a funding source. We had a recipe for success. I call it a one-stage restoration. This park was really only impacted by the non-native species. You take out that competition, the native habitat will do a lot of the work by itself without our intervention. So that gave us the reason to go forward with doing restoration at this park. Our objectives were really quite simple. Eliminate European beachgrass and ice plants within our park boundaries, and increase our native species to improve ecosystem services, right? So back in the day, I want to say like the 50s and 60s, the Soil Conservation Service was huge in spreading European beachgrass and ice plant because sand moved. Oh my gosh, like, can you believe it? But they did not like a lot of the sand movement because it prevented a lot of the development. So there was huge efforts up and down the state to plant ice plant and beachgrass to stabilize that sand so they could do development. Well, the Strand was one of those places where a lot of the dune was planted. So just in terms of plant pictures, yay! These are the characters of our story. These are the non-native characters, mostly this European beachgrass and the ice plant. This is the Carpobrotus edulis ice plant. We have other species, but this was the main one at the Strand. They are by no means the only characters, right? The non-native characters. This, the bridal creeper and this kikuyu grass have really, just within the last few years, really exploded at the park, which is a whole nother challenge for us. But for this story, it's really these two plants that we focused on because they were the biggest monocultures, I would say, on the site. For our native characters, these are our tried and true, not only dominant native plants that are out there, but also really great restoration plants. So our ambrosia, our beach fir, Camasonia, or Corythrogeny, those are really what I call our stellar restoration plants. They were ones that you could collect seed, you could propagate, you could outplant, and they just did great. They just did great. And these ones down here, our sand verbena and our rastrum, these are interesting plants. We wanted to increase these, but they ended up not being good restoration plants. They just really tough to germinate and propagate in the greenhouse. So we just decided to increase the habitat around them so they could self-seed and do it on their own. So this is just an example of the monoculture that we were talking about. Here's this European beachgrass. Oh, here's the high school right behind these trees. So we're looking north along this dune. There is nothing out there except for European beachgrass in 2007. This is actually looking kind of the same dune area, but looking south with the stacks. Here's your ice plant. Just seeing that carpet, that monoculture, and then here's your dune grass, buddy. We got some non-native buddies here. So that's just an example of kind of what the site what we were up against. In 2013, kind of when we kind of got a different set of funding, we mapped the beach grass and ice plant. It doesn't look like much from this photo, but all this pink is beach grass and the blue is ice plant. It kind of goes to the doability of the project in the sense that here's Azure Street. The beach grass is really not found north of this location. So we really felt that we could be successful. Like this was doable to us with enough time and money. We felt we could basically eradicate that beach grass from this park. Now there still is European beach grass down on the city property, down by the rock, but no longer in this park. How did we do it? Well, there's lots of different strategies, and it depends a lot on your park or your site, right? So in Oceania, they also have European beach grass. They burn it down there. So they use prescribed fire to get rid of that biomass, and then they treat it with herbicide. Up at Golden Gate National Recreation Area, they use huge heavy equipment and they excavate the beach grass and then bury it like 30 feet underneath the dune. In Humboldt, they can't use herbicide, so they do it all by volunteers. Amazing. Here at the Strand, we actually used herbicide to do most of the killing of the beach grass. We had enough funding and it was dominant enough in the sense it was a monoculture enough to use more of a spray rig here. And so as staff, we did some of the treatment, but it was mostly done by contractors. We use volunteers for the planting and our thatch removal, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Your strategy depends on your site a lot. And so that's just what we were bound to by this site. Just a couple of stories. We talked a little bit about our planting and propagation. So at Laura Strand, we knew, because the real impact on the site was from the non-native plants. We knew that we didn't need to restore every 100 acres of this park, but we did have key areas where it was just a monoculture that we wanted to quicken the restoration process and put plants in. And also in areas that were more developed, like near our campground, or in access trails that we did not want to be trails, or we call them user-created trails. So we collected seed on site, we grew them in our shade house, we transplanted from our flats into these 4-inch pots. We hardened them off on our outside and then we plant them. But part of the learning of it, like we talked about the abronia, the sand verbena, we learned that there were some plants that really just were not meant to be germinated and propagated. So what we did is we shrunk our palette to a doable palette. So we had a suite of maybe 6-7 plants that did most of the restoration work. The other natives will come in once you kick over that balance. And so that was a big learning in terms of what species were the biggest bang for your buck, if you will. This thatch removal story, this is an interesting story. Here we are killing acres of this beach grass, but look how much biomass this beach grass is. It's a lot of biomass. And what we learned, it was actually a seasonal staff. And they said, what about if we rake some of this grass? Like as most of you probably know, the high silicon content, it doesn't break down like a 4-wood, like an annual plant. That grass just stays there. It just takes a long time to break down. So she said, the seasonal staff, she's like, let's rake it and see what happens. Whoa, oh my gosh, it was amazing. The native plants just went crazy. And if you think about it, it's like taking the mulch away, and that heat and the sun just had all the native seeds that were in that dune, they just exploded. And so then we knew that the rest of the story had to be removing this thatch layer. And we just piled it in big piles. But it was a great volunteer. And it was like over 3,000 hours of volunteer work to do a lot of this thatch clearing and planting. It was amazing, amazing. So we definitely have challenges and learnings from the project. And, I think all restoration projects, I think one of the biggest learnings is, the weeds are never gone. They are just, often you take away one weed and another weed comes back. That wasn't the case in this project. The case here is just when you have public land and like that skinny part of this park, think of all that edge where all the weeds are coming in, right? All our park visitors bringing weed seeds. We have 8 access corridors that go through this park. They're just vectors for weed seeds. And so we are constantly getting new seeds, and it's just a breeding ground for weeds. So we still, 10 years after this project, we still go through at least 3 times a year to get rid of beach grass and ice plant alone. And we're not even tackling that kukua grass or the placostaches or some of these other plants that are there. So that's a constant challenge. But here, the story I wanted to talk about here, this is Beachcomber Drive, kind of between Azure Street and our campground. So this line of homes here, they love ice plant. So this ice plant was in their backyard, and you can see this is marching west towards the ocean. It just keeps going. Well, so there was a problem, right? Like they wanted their ice plant, we wanted native scrub. So a lot of neighbor meetings. Park boundaries actually almost right past their decks. But we said, well, let's go out 40 feet, and then this is going to be our treatment line. So we agreed on a treatment line so they could have some of their ice plant, but that we could restore the rest. So the ice plant didn't keep marching over the native scrub. So it was a huge challenge and will remain a challenge because, as we know, ice plant doesn't know a boundary. So we have to treat this line every year. And then here's our other fun challenge. People love our dunes. They love to put decorations. They love to put all sorts of things on park property. So we have our challenges. It's part of being parks. But we also have a lot of success, right? So since 2007, we've pretty much type converted this whole park to a more native landscape. And we're super excited about that. So much so that that beach grass created this amazing dune, artificially high dune in the system. And by taking that beach grass off, the whole topography of the park has changed. The water table has come back. This water table, there's cottonwoods and willows now growing there. The site is really just so different. The diversity of flora and fauna has increased. And then also a lot of when it was open sand, people would just walk through the park everywhere. And now with the vegetation, it's there's less trampling of our system, which is a huge success. I'm just going to show some of the successful before and afters. So here's this dune that we talked about, and this is what it looked like just a few years after that, after we removed it, all that open sand. If you were to take a picture now, there's less open sand, but it's all filled with native plants. There is no more beach grass on this dune. It's super exciting. This is by our kiosk. Here's our kiosk as you come into the campground. And this is interesting because this story is just like most people believe and it is true that ice plant and beach grass stabilize that dune, right? They planted it so sand wouldn't come to a facility, or in this case, wouldn't come to the road. And so we said to our maintenance staff, we said, hey, how about we try to plant it with natives to see if native plants can stabilize the dunes as well as ice plant. So we said, give us this corner. And so we this is all ice plant, killed all the ice plant, and we planted. This is all natives now. And down here is the same thing. We killed that. It's the same site, different angle. Killed the ice plant, planted it up. And here, these are all native plants here. And what do you know? Native plants can stabilize it just like the ice plant. Hot diggity. So it was really good for our maintenance staff to realize that natives could do what ice plant can do. Yay. We're very excited. Just another example, this is off of Highway 41, looking north. Again, just monoculture of beach grass, and now super diverse with, I still call it Lysandria, Corthrogeny and yarrow and lupin. It's just beautiful now, super excited. This is just kind of the process, you know, it takes a while, right? From ice plant, killing the ice plant, planting the little teeny natives, and for that to just start filling in. If you were to go to the site now, you wouldn't see much sand, but just all native plants. And it is a process, it takes time. It takes time for sure. One last success story. This is our Blockman's leafy daisy, Origeron blockmanii, a CMPS listed plant. I forget which listing. But in 2005, we probably had maybe 6 plants in this whole area of the park. Over 193 acres, maybe 6 plants. By 2013 or 16, I should say, the red are populations of a leafy daisy. If you go out there now, it is one of the top 5 dominant species at the park. Unbelievable. You cannot walk 5 feet without seeing leafy daisy. And here's the thing, we didn't plant any of it because it does not germinate and propagate well, or at least not in our system, or not the way how we do it. This came back completely on its own after we removed the competition of the non-native plants. Unbelievable. It's amazing. This picture, one of my coworkers found, was taken by Mike Jones. I don't know who Mike Jones is. We just found it. But it's taken from a drone. And to me, this is the ultimate success, right? From World War II days, when this was just all sand and flat, to this is the quintessential dune habitat, in the sense, or dune ecosystem, I should say. The flat strand, look at this developed foredunes. This is where all your foredune plants are, your abronia, your ambrosia, your camisonia, right? Very dynamic. And then you have your stabilized back dunes that is stabilizing your sand. We don't need ice plant and beach grass to do that. We can do it with natives. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, so that is Morro Strand. I'm going to go back to not sharing my screen to see if anyone's got questions before we move on. How's that sound? Let's do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to stop sharing. Oh, up here. Here we go. All right. Does anyone have any questions related to Morro Strand before we move on to our next site?
I have a question.
Yes.
Were all those the natives that you chose, the 6 or 7 that you chose, were they all focused on growing only sand, or could you restore a sandy ecosystem with plants that, native plants that grew up the hillsides of the Bay? I mean, was it all focused? The question is, how many of the plants in Morro Strand are, thrive in sand only, or do some of them, live equally as well in more developed soil environment?
Most of them are very adapted to sand, and like those foredune species, the ambrosia, the abronia, the camisonia, those are what we call the foredune plants in that really humpy dune area. And they are really pretty much niched to just that dynamic dune system. Like you say, as you go further east towards the high school, you've got your yarrow that can grow up on the hills, right? That's not dune specific. You've got your baccharis and your lupin that can also tolerate less sandy soil. So it's kind of more of a mixture as you get further east. So yeah, in that back dune area closer to the high school, definitely more plants that can thrive in multiple environments. They'll do fine in sand, but they will also do well, like you say, kind of more inland. But those foredune species are pretty much endemic to that, well, endemic's the wrong word, but niched for that dynamic dune environment.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Jim. You're muted. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that.
That's right.
So you said that the seeds, the native seeds, were sitting there just waiting underneath. Now, would that happen, say, in a coastal bluff area, like, say, where the Point Bouchon Trail is, where it's been grazed for a long period of time?
Sorry.
Jodi, I accidentally muted you.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know how that happened.
Sorry.
Jim, that is a perfect segue into our next site because I'm going to address that specifically.
Okay, good. I'll wait then.
We don't have any other questions, Annika, in chat? She's muted. Okay.
No, I don't see any. So
Okay, good. Let's go on because I love Jim's segue. So we're going to go on, so we can get to that. So here we are, Jim. Oh, well, I'm not there yet, but we'll get there. Okay, so now we're moving to Montaña de Oro, and we are now talking about coastal bluff scrub habitat, different than coastal dune habitat, right? So still sandy soil component, but this is the bluff scrub. Now, Annika gave me a hard time with this photo because she's like, MDO, where are the poppies? Where's the ocean? But I love it because of all these Dudleya plants. Oh, they're so beautiful. Okay, we're gonna move on. Let's see, how do I do that? Why isn't it going on? Let's see. Oh, I've got to, let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Montaña de Oro, right? So now we are south. Here's that little strip of Morro Strand. These red are park boundaries. This is Morro Strand. Here's Montaña de Oro, right? Really diverse habitats. It's our largest park in our district, and diverse habitats. But today we are only talking about the bluff trail. So this is a bluff trail. We are only talking about this bluff habitat and only talking about the habitat west of the trail, a very small sliver of habitat. But that's what we're going to talk about. And similar to Morro Strand, it was back in the day in World War II, it was a huge training ground. These troops, I mean, it was amazing the amount of people that used this landscape. I'm going to go to my laser pointer. I'm worried about people in the dunes. Look at this explosion. Oh my God, I'm worried about people trampling our vegetation. Here, the dunes like obliterated. It's just amazing to think about what our planet has endured over time. Amazing. Okay, Jim, we're getting there. Here we are, Jim. So, you know, a big history of Montaña de Oro was its ranching days and farmstead days, right? This area was huge. It was tilled, it was grazed, it was a dairy farm. This is along the bluff. You know, they used to take their products, you know, cheese, milk, all that, and they used to shove it down the chute to boats that were down here and then take it up to San Francisco, right? It was crazy, this landscape. And here you go, Jim. This is what we're talking about. So this is in 65, right after the park was a park. Look at this. So this is here's Spooner's Cove, right? So this is the terrace looking south towards Point Bouchon. Look at this, completely cleared of native vegetation. I just think that's amazing. Even up here on these upper terraces, any of you that have walked to like Valencia, you can't walk through this habitat anymore. It's so dense. And it's cleared. It's amazing. So going to Jim's point, this very much different than Morro Strand in the sense that it's had years of disturbance, right? That topsoil has been taken off from the farming. It's been compacted from the grazing land, from the grazing animals. So it is not a one-step restoration like the Strand was. Laura Strand, I call it a one-step restoration. Take off that native, the non-native component, and the land will recover. This at Morro, at Montaña de Oro, is kind of more of a two-step, three-step restoration. It needs more restoration effort because it was impacted for longer and at a greater level. So getting to that, so here we are. This is 2013. This is where our story begins for this project. This was back in the day, the trail went along the bluff. Then state parks decided we need more ADA trails. Most definitely we did. But this project was run by our Sacramento office or our headquarters. And instead of, it was supposed to be a 4-foot wide trail. Well, they brought their road equipment, not their trail equipment. So we got a 12-foot road. So that was pretty crazy. So that kind of kicked us to a whole nother level. But that kind of started this restoration project. Going back to the why. Why did we choose to restore here? Well, first of all, this is the new trail or road, whatever we want to call it. It's really a trail. And as we know, humans want to be at the edge. They don't want to be on this inland road. So what happened, the great thing is this trail brought more people to the park. It is our most popular trail. We get over 1 million visitors on this trail a year, right? So it was great. It brought more people here, but it also brought a lot of disturbance with 12-foot wide road construction, which spurred this increase of New Zealand spinach, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it also made a lot of these, all this yellow as user-created trails. So people that wanted to get from this road over to the edge. And what that was doing is that was just trampling our vegetation, increasing erosion. And so that was our ecological reason to restore it. So we had ecological reason, but then it needed to be doable. And in this case, we didn't have the funding for contractors and whatnot, but the great thing is it was very accessible. And so I knew that I could get volunteers to help us out here because it was a beautiful place to work and it was very accessible. So here's an example. This is New Zealand spinach. And over here is our native lizard tail. And you can just see it just engulfs it. It just like creeps over it and just takes over. Here's an example. Here's our new trail. And this is where people wanted to go. So they just cut through. They don't care that it's native habitat. And here, so many people use this point. They just denude it of all vegetation. So those are reasons why we wanted to put effort on this trail. So our characters in this case, New Zealand spinach. That was the main character out here that we were tackling. But, of course, we have from those ranching days, Jim, we have all those, the mustards, the radish, the thistles, all that comes from all that impact use. They're also players. Here's our native characters, which we love. Our hazardia, our golden bush, our lizard tail, our buckwheat, some of our fiddleneck, we don't propagate that. Our poppies, we don't propagate, but they are stellar at, if you give them space, they will find their way. This local weed or this straggleus, this was one of those that we just, once in a while, we'll just try some seed to see if it'll germinate and propagate. And it ended up being just a stellar plant. You could put seeds out in the seed flat and it just, all of them grew. It was a star that we didn't realize that would be such a big star. We're happy about that. So how we did it out there, a little bit different than the dunes, because it wasn't as much of a monoculture. At first it was. This is our staff spraying, again, herbicide, when there was a lot more spinach out there. But nowadays, we just spot spray with a backpack. So that's what we do to remove the non-natives. For the user-created trails that we don't want, we end up ripping up that compacted soil. In this case, it was from the farm days as well, but also from just years of visitor use. of them compacting a trail. So if we don't want the trail there, we have to, loosen up the soil so that we can spread seed or plant in it. We also do the symbolic fencing to guide our visitors. Again, we want them to be successful, but we need to show them where we want them to be. And then planting the seeds, either the seeds we collect or the seeds that we propagate and grow to plants, we then plant them out. And again, this site needed a lot more planting than that Morro Strand, because again, that Morro Strand had all that native seed component and didn't need as much planting as it does out at Montana Duro. This is just, we could not do this alone. This site has relied on volunteers pretty much to do much of the work. Over 4 20-yard dumpsters just to get rid of the biomass, just to start the project, just to get rid of that spinach so we could see where the natives were. So many user created trails that we needed to rip up so that we could plant. The story, another reason why this park was chosen is for years, State Parks has partnered with PG&E because they're our neighboring landowner for these Earth Day events. How appropriate for today, since this is the Earth Day presentation. We had gotten funding from the Park Foundation and PG&E to do large scale volunteer project. And so I thought this was a great site to do that partnership. And so every year, except for when it's COVID, we get 7,500 volunteers out there helping us with this restoration. And we just really couldn't do it without all those hands. So it lent itself really well to that. This is our, again, here's our main trail. And this was a trail that people wanted to go down. So we would fence it, we brush it in. We would have planted it this year, but we had no rain, had no soil moisture. So we had to just brush it in for now and we'll plant it next year. But again, it's disguising those user created trails, keeping people on trail. This is our growing facility. Again, some of our tried and true, this is lizard tail that we're growing. And then we're planting it in those trails to disguise them so people don't go walking down those trails. Challenges, people don't like to be told they can't go somewhere. They want to go to that point, they want to go, they don't care. And so with over 1 million visitors, it's really a lot of visitor control, of really trying to help guide people away from areas that we're trying to restore. And once again, our weeds are never gone, right? I mean, the site, here you can see our mustard out there. The weed seeds are, especially New Zealand spinach, it has a really hard seed coat. That seed's going to be there for many, 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 many years. So it's really just exhausting that seed bank over time. It's just a long-term commitment. On this site, I'd like to show this photo because this is how the keen eye that you have to have, right? Here's our New Zealand spinach right next to a golden bush or a hazardia plant, right? So we've got to really get in there and get this spinach out before it starts dominating and engulfing this plant. Here it is again here's New Zealand spinach against this really beautiful Dudleya plant. So it's different than like a farm situation or monoculture. We can't just go and spray everything because we have such native diversity out there now that we're a few years into it. So that's a challenge. Lots of success though. We have been really successful at removing a lot of that New Zealand spinach. We're really to that spot spraying stage. We've actually been able to remove some of our fence because the vegetation has grown so much that it's blocking for people not to walk through in certain areas. We have really tried to find that balance of allowing people to be on the bluff edge, but not on every bluff edge. So we've given them places where they can go, and then also given protection to nesting birds on other points. So basically we're trying to get that coexistence of our native wildlife and or native habitats and visitor access. These are just a few before and afters. This was a point that was just denuded of vegetation, and now the picture's not that great, but that's all native plants now that we've planted. So this is a classic example. Here's the new trail. Here's the old trail. And people were just like walking the whole way, just across. So what we decided is we said, let's give them one access in so they can walk along and then one access out. So we put this fence in and planted it up. So now we've got a great representation of coastal bluff scrub. Here's another example. This is the new road. And then you can just see that it was just denuded of vegetation. And now that's what it looks like. Thanks to our Amsinkia. Very happy about that one. This is again, just a user created trail showing that example of ripping it up, planting it, and then this is what we want, this filled in. And eventually we'll take that fence out once that vegetation is enough and visitor behavior has changed. So that's pretty much the two restoration projects, but just real quick, the last few slides are just, you know, state parks is a lot more than habitat restoration. You know, we work a lot in different land management issues, wildlife, our visitors, health and safety. I thought I'd put some animal pictures in here since we've seen a lot of plants, you know, just some cute pictures of some of our sensitive wildlife along our coast that we are so proud to protect, and the habitats that we're restoring help. Some of our projects that we have for sensitive species is our Western Snowy Plover project, our Black Oyster Catcher nest monitoring. This is a banding project that we have for passerines here in Los Osos. We also have, over the last few years, increased our fire and forestry portion of parks. With wildfires the way they are, we've grown this part of our staff incredibly over the last few years with doing a lot of fuel reduction and prescribed fire. So that's also what we do at state parks. And all of this is to go back to our mission statement of really protecting, you know, what we love about California. And, you know, we just hope that through these projects and through our protection of state park lands that generations will be able to enjoy what we're enjoying now. So this is the last slide, and it's, you know, I think I just wanted to share that putting this together and for Earth Day, you know, I really walked away with some hope. You know, these projects, when you look at the land of what it was like during World War II here, just on the Central Coast, and what it looks like now, it's pretty impressive how things have changed. I feel really happy to be a part of that. And, you know, just even the showing of today, all of you coming out and caring to learn about this, that gives me hope. So, so yeah, I was really excited. So I appreciate everybody presence today. I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop screen sharing and we can take some questions. All right, let's do that. All right. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Anyone chime in if they have any questions?